First of all, look, it seems a little scripted because I've thanked you enough, but thank you for doing this last minute. We had to have the Chinese perspective. So, I mean, it's really nice of you catching you yesterday and getting you here. I mean, amazing. Thanks a lot on that. And please, you can just introduce yourself. It's your show up till you don't get me in. So
lovely. Well, thank you very much, Vikram. I'm delighted to be sharing space with so many wonderful and well-spoken erudite mediators and dispute resolution professionals. I have spent some time looking at the many YouTube videos that you've been putting on, and I've certainly learned a lot. My friends and Vikram especially, my name is Andrew Lee. I was born in Australia of Chinese ethnicity. And after living and working in Australia, the United States and Europe, I then spent more than 20 years of my life in China in the field of dispute resolution. When I was in China, I was based in Beijing and Shanghai. And one of my key roles there, I am the former chief China representative of JAMS. JAMS is one of the largest dispute resolution providers in the world. They do a lot of mediations. They're based in the United States, but they do mediations all over the world. My role with JAMS, I was in charge of looking after their mainland China operations, and a large part of my role was connecting with Chinese dispute resolution institutions, Chinese courts, Chinese lawyers, and in particular Chinese mediators. So the majority of my ADR practice involves commercial disputes and negotiations in which one party is Chinese and the other is from a Western country. I speak English and Mandarin well. I speak many languages very badly, but those are my two key languages. The primary sectors I've been working in: pharmaceuticals, technology, e-commerce, real estate is another one. So that's a brief introduction about myself. I think it's much more interesting to talk about mediation in China rather than myself, though. So let me launch into that rather than spend too much time trying to talk myself up. But I did want to give some context as to where I am coming from when I speak about mediation in China, because I'm Chinese. I was born overseas. I've worked in China in the Chinese dispute resolution field. China is a huge place. There are an almost unlimited number of views and experts on China. So I'm going to give you my view, and I thought it was important to let you know the context from which I'm coming from. And the three areas, the way I thought I'd just structure things, talk about where mediation in China has come from, where it is now, and where I hope it will go. Where it has come from. It's often said mediation in China has been around for a very long time. And I think that's true. It's important to understand what that means and why that is the case. I'd say that, look, if you look at the history of China, the very first laws in China, imperial edicts from the emperor, were primarily criminal punishments. So it's if you stole something, they'd chop off your hand, or if you were a traitor, you'd have words branded into your face and all sorts of quite horrible things. Now, having that as law is well and good, but for commerce, for the general populace, if you and I have a dispute over who sold, over the sale of oranges or the provision of chickens, or a domestic dispute, usually we don't want to have limbs chopped off, right? We want to have some kind of way to resolve the situation so that we can go forward. And so what very quickly happened was people identified ways outside of the courts to resolve issues. They would identify respected, knowledgeable, authoritative people to resolve these disputes. And so society evolved around the idea of having the courts handle sort of the emperor's piece, the criminal stuff. And then for businessy, commercey, civil kind of things, there'd be issue resolvers. And that's a key part of how mediation has been around for such a long time. It wasn't called mediation back then, but the idea of mediation can be traced back to that. It's interesting. I mean, today in China, there are, I think, at least 250 official, commercial, arbitration centers. Some, not all, practice versions of mediation. I would say, broadly speaking, the mediations I have observed in China are more directive than mediations I've observed in Western countries. So what I mean by that is the mediations in China, the mediators take a very strong authoritative role. They're rarely shy about saying what she or he believes is right or should happen. And importantly, I think the parties are quite comfortable with that. They even expect that. I have seen mediations where the mediator has looked to be more, what do you think? What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? And parties can be quite surprised. Oh, I don't know. I mean, isn't that your job? That history of mediation, that the way that mediation is practiced in China, I think is certainly gradually changing, and I'll talk about that in terms of where I hope it will go. But that is where things have come from my perspective. In terms of where mediation is now, I think it's important to recognize there's a key cultural strength embedded in China, in Chinese traditional culture, given where it's come from. The idea of we want to diminish conflict, we want to maintain a relationship, we want to step outside of the court system. It's not so much I demand my rights, it's more how can we go forward, right? And that's sort of I think a cultural trait that plays very much into the idea of mediation. I think what's less appreciated outside of China is how technologically sophisticated mediation has become in China. The development of online systems, the online legal infrastructure, virtual mediations, apps, recognition in legislature about how things can be used, either taken into evidence or at least be considered and recognized, text messages, social media comments. All these things have and simply making it easier for people to attend a mediation, I think has been something that I've been very, very impressed with in China. Outside of the big cities like Beijing and Shanghai, I mean, places like Beijing and Shanghai, Shenzhen, they are like any very, very modern, sophisticated city, right? You've got ultra high speed internet, you've got video conferencing, all those sort of things. But not everybody has access to that. And one thing that has impressed me is how China has developed inexpensive ways for people outside of the big cities to be involved in the mediation process through an inexpensive phone or something on a tablet. I've seen legislation in China get increasingly strong and cognizant and recognizing of the importance of mediation and the impact and making sure that mediation settlements can be enforced. I've seen increasing judicial support. Like almost every country in the world, I believe, Chinese courts are increasingly busy. It takes longer for your case to go through the process, and the judiciary is keen on finding ways to speed things up. Another key part, I think, which is relevant to China, is that mediation is actually constitutionally enshrined. If you go through the Chinese constitution, there is a chapter on mediation. These are all the strengths, I think, that speak to the importance of mediation in China. In terms of some of the challenges, I think social change in China has happened so quickly. And the social infrastructure of today is very different to what it was in the past. China is less communal. People are more independent. People have a greater passion towards individual rights. and I would say a slightly less community orientated feelings. The idea of a community mediator is a little less acceptable. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but it is a different thing. To make it, to give a practical example, Vikram, look, today people live in high-rise apartments, not villages or communes. People connect via their smartphone through social media. They are much less likely to gather around the village center square. Now, what that means is that, I mean, certainly when I was living in China, as I said, for 20 years, I rarely even knew my neighbors, the person living literally down the hall from me. In that situation, it's a lot harder to expect there to be kind of respected community elder who everybody would take their disputes to, right? If I don't know the person in the building or the person upstairs or downstairs from me, it's very unlikely that I'm going to go to that person and then say, hey, whatever, Father Joe or Madam Zhang, can you help me resolve my dispute with my wife or with my neighbor because they're playing the drums too loud at nighttime, whatever it is. So the idea of that community mediation has become almost a little bit odd, a little bit old-fashioned, a little bit inappropriate. So that's one. I think the idea of the modern professional mediator who wears a suit, understands the law, he's highly educated, very eloquent. I don't think it's possible to be a full-time professional mediator in China. I think that's very, very rare. I think in China today, being a mediator, a commercial mediator, a domestic dispute mediator, it's more an adjunct to something that you do to your main job. So I might be the partner of a commercial law firm, and I also practice mediation, but it's very, very rare to find a mediator. Because the mediation, just in practical speaking, the mediation part of one's work pays less well than real jobs. And I think that's unfortunate. I also think that at the professional level, where there's big money and contracts and business people and lawyers, that group still doesn't really understand what mediation is and why it is good. There is still a bit of a holdover to the community mediator idea, where, well, mediation is sort of the, there's actually a phrase in Mandarin where inexperienced, poorly trained community mediators are like old people stirring the mud. Whereas if you want a clever, sophisticated, smart person to resolve your dispute, well, you'd go to court or you'd find an arbitrator. Arbitration is something that is very, very well understood in the business, the professional sector of China. If anyone says alternative dispute resolution, it usually means arbitration in China, and it doesn't mean mediation. Now, what are my hopes for mediation in the future? As I said, I want to keep this relatively brief, just to start some ideas and then encourage discussion. I do see a lot of opportunity, and I do see a lot of growth in mediation. Many of those 250 arbitration centers that I previously referred to are increasingly interested in mediation, and more Chinese professionals are heading overseas, are becoming more familiar with what's happening outside of China, and how mediation can be just as much a tool in the ADR arsenal as arbitration. I would like to see mediators become more respected for their work, be more professionally recognized, and have more reasonable compensation. And as I said, I'd love to see mediation become seen as equal to, if not better, than arbitration and litigation as a means to resolve a dispute. I'd really like to see Chinese mediation and Chinese ADR become more globally connected. We were having a brief discussion about this yesterday, Vikram, and I feel China is in a situation where the domestic market is so huge. It's very possible to do everything domestically and still be quite well off. Yeah. So there is a significant sector of people that think, look, I can hardly come to grips with everything that's happening in Shanghai, let alone let alone try and think about cooperations with Israel or with Italy or with Australia. So let me get on top of my own backyard first before I try and go overseas. As I said, I really think that misses a great opportunity. I think China has so much to teach about mediation, culturally, technologically, legislatively, and I think a lot of it is missing, and it could bring so much to global ADR. Vikram, I understand, for example, that there were some issues in finding someone to talk about Chinese mediation for this symposium. I don't think, in fact, I know it's not because mediation isn't important or nobody practices mediation in China. I do think there's a little bit of over internal looking in China, and I think that could be better. I also think China has so much to learn about mediation. If you look too much inside, you miss a lot about what's happening in other countries, in other cultures, in other jurisdictions. I was very lucky to work for a very, very large international American-based ADR institution, and therefore I got to see how things in the United States worked really well, what challenges they faced. I think that with greater cooperation between jurisdictions and between cultures, that could only bring mutual benefit to China and to the global ADR community. So Vikram, that was a quick download. As I said, I'm always hesitant to do long monologues. I think that's not good for my voice. It's not good for your audience's attention. So I'm happy to switch more into a dialogue. I welcome my friends Abe and Giovanni, I've heard who are online with us. And if anything I have said you'd like to hear more about, I did go across things quite quickly. Happy to delve deeper into anything that you find interesting. If you've read or if you've heard or if you've watched something about China and Chinese mediation, please ask me. Happy to have a discussion about that. Yeah, but let me end by saying so I speak Chinese. It's interesting, the Chinese language differs from Western languages in that Chinese language doesn't have an alphabet, but Chinese has characters, and these characters are made out of pictures, right? And the way that you put characters together, or you put little pictures together in order to create much more complicated pictures. So there's a picture for the sun is actually the drawing of a sun. The picture of a moon is the drawing of a moon. And my friends, just take a guess. If you put a sun and a moon together, the picture of a sun and a moon together, can you guess what that might mean? I'll take it in chat, or I'll take it in, you can say it. What is a sun and a moon together? You put the two pictures together.
They're going to put it in the chat. What am I thinking? What is it?
If you put a sun and a moon together.
Can't think of something. Please.
The sun and the moon together is the character for bright or brilliant, because if you have a sun and the moon in the sky at the same time, it's very brilliant. I'm particularly fond of that character because that's my name. In Chinese, my name is he who is brilliant and magnanimous. So I actually vastly prefer that name. In fact, Vikram, for the rest of this discussion, please address me as he who is brilliant and magnanimous. Yeah, don't call me Andrew. But all Chinese names are like that. So we're all glorious warrior from the mountains, or elegant swan whose beauty equals the goddess. And then what's really funny is then we say, hello, I'm glorious warrior, please call me Jenny or whatever. But why I went through all this is because then there's a wonderful group of characters all related to ADR. So for example, the characters for mediation are the symbol for tuning, come from the symbol for tuning an instrument. And then there's the picture of a bull having its horns removed. And the idea is mediation is about creating taking something that is dangerous but very valuable, tuning it by removing the dangerous parts and leaving behind the valuable parts. Right. So later on, I can sort of write the character for mediation for you. Then there's negotiation. Negotiation is a lovely one. Negotiation is the symbol for fire and speech put together, and then the symbol of a goat's head being divided in two by an axe or by a sword. And that's negotiation. It sounds a little bit confronting, but the idea behind negotiation is we would be sitting around a fire talking about how to distribute meat. It's interesting. I mean, today Chinese people usually don't know the history of our characters. We just say, oh, this is how you write negotiation. This is how you write mediation. But when you look back at it, there's a great deal of, I think, cultural wisdom in some of these characters. So at a later point, I'll put up how you write mediation, negotiation, contract, relationship in Chinese. It's a whole topic in itself. It's quite beautiful. So let me stop talking, my friends, and give you the opportunity to make a comment, ask a question, criticize, or just voice an opinion.
So first, thank you very much, Andrew. Very nice. But first thing, tell me, what are these characters? What does this mean?
That looks like it looks like a name. Waker. Oh, Vikram. There we go. It's your name. Yes, Vikram. Yeah. And just to be so yes, it's Waker. It's a phonetic translation of your name. But importantly, whoever did it did a very good job, because not only did they come up with a very good phonetic translation, but they picked good words to which have a nice phonetic translation. So for example, that first one, you and I share a name. That first character is magnanimous. That's the symbol for magnanimous. It's pronounced Wei. And that's your name is Vikram. So it's, in those characters, it would be Wei Kuren, which sounds pretty close to Vikram. Side note, the practice of translation and creating names in China is a very, very big business, because it is very easy to simply create a phonetic translation, so a translation which has the same sound, but actually has a very bad meaning. So for example, the name Ben, B-E-N, in Chinese, the character Ben is stupid, right? Ben and Ben sound very, very close. So there are some people that would just say, oh, well, I'll just pick a word that sounds close to, what's this word? Ben. Okay, yeah, that's close to Ben. And then they go around trying telling everybody that they're stupid. So that's a bad thing. The gold standard of translation, though, is Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola, because Coca-Cola paid $1 bajillion to come up with a translation of Coca-Cola in Chinese, which is 可口可乐, which is basically happiness and tasty. It sounds like Coca-Cola. It's got a name, happiness and tasty. And that's basically a slam dunk, right? In terms of a practical thing, as you go to China, if you can adopt a Chinese name, it's great, and you have it on your name card or your QR code or whatever it is, you will instantly get a smile from your Chinese counterpart. And coming up with a good name like your own there, Vikram, who is a very magnanimous person, is a great way to just start that professional relationship building process. It's a lot easier to call somebody by a name in their own language. And if you have taken the effort of coming up with a Chinese name, that is something that Chinese people will always talk about behind your back and say, oh, that person has a Chinese name and it's very nice. Or as opposed to, oh, this person came along and he's Michael, he's Fred, she's Sally. Chinese people are used to it. That doesn't mean they will not appreciate the effort of taking a Chinese name.
But tell me, all these other symbols, what do they mean? I mean, all these other ones. I mean, is there a meaning for each of them? I mean,
there are. I'm a little less. The second and the third are a little bit more phonetic. It's less. I need to give some thought because not only are each character has its own meaning, but often, in fact, very frequently, they need to be combined with another character. So I'll just give some thought as to what other characters your others are trying to combine with, and I'll think of.
But what is this on the side? What does that say?
I'm sorry. Well, I hope I didn't give you just a zoom in of my nostril hair just then. No, so you don't need to turn it sideways. Up and down.
Okay, it is that.
Can I have a look at it afterwards? Because
yeah, please.
I'm actually having. I can't quite see it totally clearly, so I'll have a look at it. Maybe if you could take a photo, send it to me an email, and I'll make sure I have a good look at it and give it some thought. We can come up with Chinese names for everybody as well.
Okay,
Giovanni. I'm sure I can come up with a good Chinese name from that.
Okay, but I tell you, I had a twofold challenge. Like you said, one, identifying someone from China. The most important thing is the person has to be a nice person. So that combination had to be there. So that was another important challenge. We found one. So that job done. Be it last minute, doesn't matter. So we got that aspect going. But tell me, in terms of the rural population, what you have about in China, about 30%, I would think, about rural population. Have you had some experience interacting with people there? I mean, what happens there?
Yeah. No, in fact, I will say a large amount of my rural, for want of a better word, rural population encounters has been with people involved in real estate disputes. It actually is understanding the cases that are involved, and there's a lot of similarity behind these cases, but it goes quite deeply into the complexity of social change happening very rapidly, and how simple solutions are not the best solutions. So with that prefix, I'll just tell you one case. For example, there was a situation in which a large rural population were living in a residential area that was basically a slum, to put in a better word. There was very, very poor sanitation, hygiene, certainly, spotty internet, all that sort of stuff. It wasn't a good place. And this big real estate developer, not Evergrande, which is in the news a lot right now, but a big real estate developer came in and spotted an opportunity to do well and also do good. So this real estate developer came in and said, look, we're going to knock all of this down. We're going to build a fancy new complex a little bit further away. That place will have Wi-Fi and flushing toilets and air conditioning and a nice curated garden. And importantly, you are currently renting these slums, but for that property, we'll give it to you. You will have title over that property. All you need to do is sign over your rights to this property, and then you can move over there and take title. And all the economic people, the big business people saw this as a incredibly well-intentioned, and it was a well-intentioned. This property, look, of course, the developer wanted to make money, but the developer himself was from, the CEO was from a rural background. And so it was seen as an incredibly generous gesture. And media came, and there was going to be this big vote, and it was a big thing where all the residents would come and sign and say, you're welcome, and then we'd have a big party and a big feast and drinks, and we toast this modern, forward-thinking, borderline philanthropic real estate developer. You can probably guess that this didn't end well, which is why I became involved. And almost the entirety of the residents refused. The original comments were, these people are clearly dumb and they're uneducated, and how silly they are. Don't they understand what a great deal this is? And now, Vikram, to go to some of the complexities, as I began talking to these residents that had refused this offer, why they had refused was deeply interesting. The first is, look, they broadly speaking, they just didn't feel respected because they thought big, important, rich person comes in, says, move over there, take this money, and we're supposed to be grateful. They weren't terribly happy about that. But more deeply, these were all workers of an now defunct state-owned enterprise. They were the workers of a power company, making electricity from burning coal. As China has been moving more green, coal mines are being, old dirty coal mines have been shut down. They all lost their jobs, right? So they were all jobless. But as part of their salary, going back to a much less capitalistic and more communist time in China, they were paid extremely poorly, but they could live in these properties paying 1 renminbi rent a month, which is basically free. It's like 20 American cents a month. They had a property. They were considered quite socially high status people because they were working to power the country. We were working to power the motherland. And so, and they were all together. They worked together. They lived together. They looked after each other's children. Perhaps they didn't go to fancy schools, but they went to school together. And for them, it wasn't a slum, it was their home. And if you move everybody off to different places and give them fancy, buildings with Wi-Fi and internet, you're actually A, tearing apart that social fabric and highly disrespecting them, and B, breaking that last link they had to good China, when everybody had a job, when our children were, listened to their parents, when girls didn't wear mini skirts, and when boys were polite. That was the sort of language that I heard from them. That really struck me, Vikram. I mean, because, I came at this from a purely sort of practical economic perspective. Who wouldn't want a nice new house? Who wants to have water from the well when you could have filtered water from my lovely tap? Who doesn't want high-speed Wi-Fi? That was a case that really has stuck with me for a long time.
Well, that's the interesting part, that of course that aspect of society changing and some people still, in a way, part of what the older system was, in a way gives you some hope that yes, you can tell people that this also existed, which was the idea behind the symposium, that tell people about what has been part of the history, because they would not even know. I mean, like, you knew this only because you came into contact with these people. But otherwise, I'm saying, you start living in cities and, like you said, there's no connection even with your neighbor. Life has changed everywhere. It's not China. It's happened everywhere. And that has changed in terms of dispute resolution. That definitely has changed those aspects of our collaborative dispute resolution. So we have to start looking at how we can take people back. Definitely. I mean, we have to work to that. We can't just give up and say, no, now we cannot take people back. Let the modernization happen. Everything, let that happen. I'm sure if it's good for people, why not? But this aspect, we have to move them back, and we have to think of ways to do that. Definitely. But this whole community thing, but how, I mean, do you have any suggestions on how you create that within cities, that whole community feeling, and even towards dispute resolution? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, that's I think that's the million dollar question, Vikram, and it is something that is discussed a lot in China right now. I think just more broadly speaking, look, China is always in the media. Everybody has a comment about China, and I think English language press about China is very different to Chinese language press about China. International media about China is very different to what comes out of China. Now, I think discussions about media is perhaps a bigger question. But one thing is that there is a lot of talk about how, yes, we are all richer. We have nicer clothes, we live in nicer houses, we can travel on, you know, we get on planes. Before, you know, when I grew up, I could hardly afford a bicycle. Now I can fly business class to Paris. You know, that's all good. No one's saying that's a bad thing. Increasingly, there is the concern, though, at what cost? And is that cost inevitable? This idea that, you know, when I was young, we would look after the chickens together with everybody. Or when I was young, after school, we'd all go to Grandma Fong's house and she'd make dumplings for everyone. Whereas these days, I don't know who else lives on my floor. These days, there's increasing road rage, there's increasing divorce, there's increasing bullying at school. And these things didn't happen before. Now, I'm absolutely convinced part of that is rose-tinted glasses. And what I mean by that is I'm certain that the past was not this wonderful, idyllic life where everybody just held hands and sang Kumbaya. But I'm equally certain that, I think to your point, Vikram, there are aspects of this more communal life that bring advantages to the modern world. And in our rush to become more educated and more demanding of my rights, and look, no one's going to say your rights are bad. I'm a lawyer, right? Of course, my whole work is about enforcing rights. There is something about at a societal level, when you fight so much for what I want, and it comes at the expense of what we have or who we are, I think you lose something very valuable. And when you go to these, you know, ancient Chinese characters and you look at the thinking about what negotiation was, what a contract was, how a contract was interpreted, what mediation was interpreted. I think I think we certainly have lost something that's very valuable. Your key question, Vikram, was, so what can we do about it? If I had the golden answer to that, I think I'd be, you know, running China or running the world. One aspect, I think, in which China is heading towards is measuring society by GDP, by wealth, by the number of PhDs that you have and which university you went to. For a large amount of time, that was key. That was the driven thing about China, right? And everything came secondary to how much money you had, how big's your house, how different is your life this year, wealth-wise, compared to what it was last year. I'm beginning to see that change on a raft of different levels. Like from the government level, GDP is always going to be important, but it's not quite the, we can pollute every river, we can burn down every forest as long as we get a good GDP that it was before. Increasingly, people are becoming interested in, you know, in yoga, in community farming, and that's getting government funding, these sort of community activities. Foundations are being set up, non-profits are being set up. Look, is it happening too slowly? Yes, absolutely. Did I wish it happened faster? Did I wish I could wave a magic wand and fashion society into this golden, perfect thing that somehow I can imagine? Of course I could. Of course I do. And I know that's not going to happen. But I do see at a range of different levels some positive thinking towards. I'm glad you have your Harvard degree or your Peking University degree or your new yacht. That's not just that's not the only goal of life, though. And I hope as a society, China, the world, can be headed in that direction.
Good thoughts, Andrew. But because right now you will still have a generation which can connect you to what things were like. So if that generation is there, I mean, after that, people have grown up in this situation. So do they know better? Have they seen better? Maybe not. So I think that period, it's a good period maybe to do that, I think, definitely. So, but Abe wants to know.
It is you're right now connecting to that generation. Sorry, Vikram, I'll just make a quick comment.
Please,
I'm thinking of my mother-in-law
exactly,
right now. So
exactly.
I often speak with my mother-in-law. So she was born in China. During her time when she was a child, so she speaks Russian, because at that time the primary foreign language was Russian. So she has Russian pen pals, and it's quite interesting. Speaking to someone with a Chinese face speaking what I think is fluent Russian. Oh, side note, she was also a trained sniper in the Chinese army, and dating the daughter of a Chinese sniper really makes you think how important peace building is within the family, because that was an interesting wooing period, but we're all happy now. But yeah, no, I think having conversations, the difference between speaking to her, who was raised where Russian was the primary language, where they lived in a village and they ran around with coal dust things in the street, whereas and my son growing up now, where if he goes to the beach, I need to sign 17 different forms to waive liability. In case he steps on a stone. There is certainly a lot of, I often find there are important things to learn, and her thinking keeps me grounded. Look, I'm not immune to wanting a nicer car and a nicer house, and private school is expensive, and business class is more comfortable than economy class, and I'd rather stay in a 5-star hotel, but I can't afford it, all that sort of stuff, right? So I'm not trying to say that I'm some, barefooted prophet that wants everybody to just go and hold hands and live in the forests. I think there are certainly parts of, when you look at poverty in China, it's terrible, and I don't want people to live like that. I want them to be richer. I want them to have a nice house with flushing toilets and Wi-Fi. Right? I do think it's possible to have to combine the good and the modern, and at the moment we haven't quite got the balance right. And there are certainly things about the past that we should let go. For example, another comment from my family, not my mother-in-law, but that generation. They have some quite strong views about, men should only marry women, for example. And I have much less strong views on that. Let's put it that way. And I've had some quite strong disagreements on that. And so look, society does have to change. Making sure that we can change it in the right way whilst keeping the important parts of the past is important. So I'm sorry, I feel like I've hit that beat enough, Vikram. I'm happy to move on if you want to.
No, I think
something that's very,
these are important
very
things.
Deep and passionate to me.
Andrew, this is really important. This is what we need. This is what we need. People at least talking about it. Even the one conversation at least gets it out there that people start thinking. But maybe you don't realize that a lot of people don't even think on these issues, because they're that whole day-to-day life, there's so much happening and getting all these things, and they don't know how much they have to get, because there's always something more. So I think all that, I mean, something related to the conversation we were having yesterday. Basically, your concern was, you wanted to understand, how is this guy able to do this? What does he do? How is he able to be a mediator only? All those things. But like I told you, at some point of time, you have to tell yourself that this is what you need. I mean, you don't need more than that. So I think those are the things that become important. But let's just now look at the global part of it. Like you said that not connected too much globally. So in that sense, do you think, of course, being a signatory to the Singapore Convention and cross-border, obviously, look, cross-border, definitely there's lots happening with China. So in that, are we looking at mediation coming in? So we have mediators now coming out and we seeing more of them?
Yeah, no, I think I do see hope there. Of the 250 arbitration institutes that I referred to, I think there's 4, maybe 5 big ones. And those big ones, almost on a weekly basis, have a symposium, a conference, a project with the Singapore, a Singapore counterpart, or a Korean counterpart, or an EU counterpart, or something happening in the African continent. So each one of them, on a very regular basis, are doing their best to bring in mediators so that they have a global panel of mediators. They're very keen. They're all keen on showing how global they are, and to encourage their clients to use mediators that are not just Chinese, and also to think about co-mediation, for example. So you would have one Chinese, one German mediator. So increasingly that's happening. I would say that that's happening at a much more successful level with arbitration than it is with mediation. When it comes to cross-border disputes, commercial disputes, arbitration still is king, with the idea of having a panel of 3 arbitrators, perhaps 2 of which are Chinese, or one is from mainland China, one's from Hong Kong, China, one's from Italy, to arbitrate a dispute. That's very, very common. The idea of having a cross-border mediation in which one party is from France, one party is from China, and you have a French mediator and a Chinese mediator, that is much less common. And although the Singapore Convention has been signed, and I hear a lot of academic comment about it, to be very frank, I've seen much less practical use of it. It keeps being held up as a big step forward. You know, this is going to be our version of UNCITRAL. At least to me, I have not seen that actually happen. Would I like to see it happen? Absolutely. And I feel mediation is still seen as the sort of the inferior option compared to arbitration, because arbitration is sophisticated and clear and strong because you can enforce an arbitral award. Very clever, experienced arbitrators who've had 30 years in the field are doing it. But when it comes to mediation, it's a little bit more fluffy. You know, they talk about feelings. I don't want to talk about my feelings. I just want to get something business done. You know, are they going to make me do stretches on a mat or something? You know, that I've sometimes even found that no, not meditation, mediation is what we're talking about. At least in Chinese, the 2 characters are very different, but in English they're quite similar, right? So that I think is where we are at in terms of mediation now. A lot of work is being done. I think it's helping. What frustrates me is I think it's moving slower than I wish it would, because I think there's so much opportunity. To me, mediation just seems a lot more of a sensible option when you have cross-border disputes, when you have jurisdictions in which awards, frankly, might not be enforced quickly or at all. when you have issues in which the long-term relationship is so critical. When you're talking about big business, cross-border business, no one really, I would suggest it's less common to have a one-off cross-border contract, right? I mean, if you're trying to do something in China, you're setting up a factory or you're buying property or whatever it is, it's rare that you're in and then you sell and then you leave. You're going to be there for 40 years. And if you have a dispute and it's resolved through arbitration, I get it. There's a lot of advantages to arbitration. I think you still have that relationship damage. Because it's in a way, to me, arbitration is increasingly looking like litigation. Whereas through mediation, you do have the opportunity to just hash things out, talk things through. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be all friendly and warm, but there is more space to reach an agreement that both parties can live with and which puts the relationship on a better upward trajectory. So to me, mediation is a no-brainer. I think we need to have mediators recognized as worthy, respectable, good professionals. I mean, to date, I think a lot of mediators, in order to get their name out, do things for free or charge very little. And I understand that that's one way of encouraging people to use mediation. And perhaps at the beginning, that's an important way so that people are in the door. My concern, though, is that if that becomes the norm, and I'm worried that it is becoming the norm, that actually diminishes the reputation of mediation. If a company is willing to pay, let me make it $50,000 for an arbitrator, then arbitration gets valued at $50,000. If a mediator is willing to do it for free, or just to give it a go, why don't you? I'll charge you $1,000. Well, then, that immediately sets up, I think, some unfortunate precedents. No one's asking. I mean, cardiac surgeons don't volunteer their services. Look, I'll operate on your heart for free just so that you know what I'm doing. I mean, everybody knows it's really hard, it's really expensive, and we need to pay a lot of money for it because it's good. I'd like to see that happen to mediation, and I'm concerned too much, let's do it for free, might be working against us.
Well, the way I've done it is that it's not free. There's no nominal charge. You pay whatever value you've received, and people have been fair. So I can't. I mean, first of all, because making them start a process which they have no idea about, I think that was the challenge, and that I think you had to get over by this way. Okay, do it. At least try it. You can pay. If you're successful, why not? But I think what I'm looking at it is, if there is so much arbitration, then is MedArb going to be the area to start with in introducing? Is there something happening on that?
Yeah, really good question, Vikram. And yes, that is already happening, and I think that's a way that I see mediation coming in a much more organic and sophisticated manner, rather than, hey, I'll do it for free. Having the arbitrator suggest, or the institution suggest, why don't we do MedArb or ArbMed or MedArbMed, or there's lots of different ways that you can do it. But I think that is a very good way to do things, and increasingly I have seen that happen. And there's a debate as well as to whether MedArb is not a perfect system as well. There are various issues with it in terms of neutrality, and do you compromise the neutral and things like that. But overall, I think the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. And if a key advantage is that it gets mediation in the door without necessarily giving things away for free, I'm all in favor of that. So certainly the big institutions are doing that. And just look, I'm happy to say some names. I think CTAC is one that's often referred to in China, CIETAC. They're primarily based in Beijing, but they do a lot of work. The Shanghai, there's some very good groups in Shanghai, and out of Shenzhen as well. There's the Shenzhen Court of International Arbitration that is also doing a lot of med arb. So there's institutions that are doing that, and I'm all in favor of it.
Because the way I'm looking at it is that definitely I want to keep both the words separate. So one model which I think Singapore has done is have a arbitration center, have a mediation center, and refer matters to the mediation centers, and it's a separate institution, because that confusion is already there. People don't know the process, and both of them are getting linked in most places. So I think that at least should happen. And UNCITRAL, luckily in the model law, has said unless the parties agree, the arbitrator should not be a mediator, and that aspect of it, that should be quite clear. I think that way people would understand that that's not the way to go. That some people were doing that. Okay, let the arbitrator do the mediation, and if it doesn't succeed, go back to arbitration, and the arbitrator is the same. I think that part of it. But do you have any idea what's happening on the Belt and Road Initiative as mediation being introduced in that? Is there a?
I'm less up to date on the latest. I do know that early on they had set up some key dispute resolution institutions in Xi'an, which is the start point for Belt and Road. And my understanding was that they had a global panel of neutrals attached to that institution for resolving Belt and Road Initiative disputes, recognizing that litigation on Belt and Road Initiative disputes was probably not ideal. I thought that seemed to prefer arbitration than mediation. To be honest, I haven't gone any deeper than that. But I know that they certainly were opening to quite a large amount of fanfare, opening whether it was called a court, the Belt and Road Court, or I think it had a different name, the Belt and Road Dispute Resolution Institute or something like that. But absolutely, arbitration was part of that. I think mediation was referred to, but again, I think that it sort of came across as secondary to arbitration, as far as I understood it.
But tell me, Andrew, how much time does it take for a matter to actually get resolved in courts? What is the time frame there in the courts?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I have certainly heard of cases that go, 5, 6, 8, 10 years.
Yeah.
And at the business level, if you're trying to wait 10 years for a result, I mean that just doesn't work. And I think that applies whether you're in India, whether you're in Italy, whether you're in Australia, everywhere. So then, of course, you have things like injunctions and emergency issues and that sort of stuff, but still it takes time. So the usual key advantages of dispute resolution being it's quick, it's speedy, you can select your neutral, they all apply. They apply to China just as much as they apply to places outside of China.
But I know in terms of not being updated on what's really happening in terms of the legal provisions in China, but was there a concept of a settlement agreement being enforced as like a court decree? Can you get it executed?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So a lot of mediation these days happens through the courts. So it's court, whether you call it court annexed or court referred. And when it's done that way, a settlement reached through that kind of mediation has the power of a court order. So the legislation on the enforcement of mediated settlements is increasingly sophisticated, increasingly strong, and the institutions, as is right, I mean, it's in their interest to promote the enforcement of these settlements. The big institutions work hard with the judiciary, with the judges, with the courts, with the legislature to make sure that mediation settlements are enforced.
Because look, like in India, we have a very good legislation that even if the matter is not in court, I mean, just private mediation, that settlement agreement is as good as a court decree. So I was just wondering if you have a similar legislation there. Is there something there?
Yes. Yep. And I mean, obviously, a key part of making sure before you walk into the mediation, you have to sign all those documents to make sure that you come under the appropriate legislation that says, if we reach a settlement, this settlement has the power of a court order. Yes.
That's damn good. I think that these are things. Look, I'm telling you, in India, no one knows about it. It's been there for 25 years. No one knows about it. I don't know the situation there. I think that awareness also might be important, because if people don't even know that a settlement agreement that they reach. Look, I keep saying, in a village in India, in some remote village, if you can get a settlement agreement which is as good as a court decree, what better for a country like ours? I mean, we've got, of course, 60% rural population, but the word hasn't reached out. So I am trying to get that word out first, that the law is there, you can use it. The only issue that I'm facing now is, because we signed the Singapore Convention, and to ratify it, there's a bill being drafted, and there are people who are giving a totally different perspective, that let's regulate, let's do this and that. I don't think they understand the scale, because yesterday, after our conversation, I had a session with these two people who are working in the ODR space in India, and one of them has a platform which is really reaching out. I mean, large numbers. They said now they've hit the 1 million mark on that platform. So they're really doing good things on scale and reaching out all over. So if those kind of initiatives and that work gets affected because of legislation, that will be sad, because now the traction has built up. I think the only problem is the foresight of the government, or I mean, like, with the look, like the court aspect of it just has been a problem. I mean, if you're saying free and mediation, that's exactly where it's been connected. And the worst part is, litigation and mediation has been connected with that. So imagine the message that goes out, that litigation and free and mediation have some something to do with each other. So that is a bit of an issue that I mean, I feel is a problem, because mediation and arbitration is a confusion everywhere. To get that out and get this free and court out of it, there are lots of activities that we have to do. Andrew, there is work for us, a lot of work, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
Understood, Vikram. And Vikram, I noticed that our time is becoming short. I did just let me thank Abe and Giovanni, who have been with us, listening very carefully. I don't want to put you on the spot, so I did also want to give you the opportunity, if you have something to say or something to ask, very welcome to either take a question on video or in chat if you like. And if you don't, if you've just been listening and have been completely spellbound by my amazing discussion, then you're welcome to you don't have to say anything. But I did want to at least acknowledge you, and if you have something to comment, give you that opportunity as well.
Okay, let me give you a little background. Giovanni is one of those really enthusiastic people. Look, imagine he's in Italy and what the time will be. He picks up his morning coffee and he's here. And he's seen this only because he's seen it coming live on YouTube. He doesn't know that this session was about to happen, because it's not being announced otherwise. So he has that enthusiasm. He has, like he's put in the chat, he has thousands of questions. Okay. My only thing is, I don't normally give him a chance to ask the questions, because sometimes it takes a little long in the question part of it. So if you're not short of time, I can ask him to come in and ask his questions directly. Otherwise, I can ask him to put in the chat.
Maybe just one, because I did want to acknowledge it's very kind to Abe and Giovanni for giving up time. So
are you short of time?
I don't have heaps, but maybe just one, Giovanni, or
are you
Abe?
short of time, or what is the situation? How much time do you have?
Can we make it 5 more minutes? Would that be all right?
Perfect. So with Giovanni, the question will be 5 minutes, but definitely, Giovanni, please please ask the question yourself.
I handle just very few questions. Otherwise, we will never stop. China is not a country; is a continent. Has incredible history, and it's very difficult to understand, to know you. First of all, because of the language, different languages, the characters, and so on. There are huge numbers, huge statistics about mediation and mediators in China, but it's very difficult for me to understand what's getting on, what's happening. So please, if possible, to have the links to some articles written in English about what's happening. Just listen to you. I remember the same huge changes in Italy at the very beginning of the 60s. How mediation not used, how mediation much used, was the difference with the very past. very similar travel in China, in what I heard from you, and also in Italy. And I really like to read a lot about what's happening in your country as far as mediation is concerned. So if possible, please, papers or links to papers about mediation in China. Many thanks.
Because Andrew, let me tell you, Giovanni writes a lot of papers. So definitely I'll send you, he can send you, because you can connect with Andrew directly. His LinkedIn profile is on the website. So I think because he writes a lot of papers, and like I said, very enthusiastic about the whole thing. And his paper, which is put for the symposium, because that compilation will happen. So you'll have a look. He's really gone into the history and everything. So that'll be interesting. And if you also want to give a paper, take your time. Let's put a compilation together. It'll be nice as good resource for people. So because you're short of time, thank you very much, Andrew. Really nice for I can't thank you enough. Let me thank that Lim also. That Lim also needs to be thanked.
Vikram, first let me say I acknowledge, Giovanni, your question was regards to English language literature about mediation in China. So let me give you some, give that some thought, and I'll find a way to get that to you. And I also want to be fair. Abe, did you have anything that you wanted to?
Yeah, he had a question which I did not. Yeah, he had a question. What is the symbol for compromise?
Symbol for compromise. Look, I will put through. I actually wrote an article on a couple of symbols related to ADR, so I'll send that through, and you can look at the symbol for compromise, for negotiation, for contract. Very quickly, Abe, it's quite a culturally rich character. It's two characters, the symbol for compromise. The first is the symbol of a hand picking up a woman. The second is a very, very simplified character now. It used to be a very complicated character, but basically it's three dogs running in the same direction. And the idea behind compromise, and this is going back a long time, is it was giving up your daughter or one of your women to the rival warlord or chief or whatever, such that our tribes could run in the same direction. I think if we had to come up with a way to write compromise these days, we would do it very differently. But that character, that's going back, 3,000 years or something. But it's quite an interesting character. The symbol for woman comes up in a lot of Chinese characters, Chinese words. I like, in particular, the symbol for peace is the symbol for a woman in a house. And the symbol for good is the symbol of a woman with the symbol for child next to each other. So, but just a couple of things for you there, my friends. It's been wonderful.
Yeah. No, but Andrew, before that, you must first of all in your paper, please bring these symbols out. It'll be really important. And before you get the last word, let me again, like I said, that thing didn't come out. That Lim needs to be thanked for putting me in touch with you. So him also. And now your final words, and we'll end at that. I will not say anything beyond that. Yeah, please.
My friends who are both online and who are looking at this at a later stage, it's been my honor to be here and share space with you. I hope I've given you just a tiny glimpse into the big topic that is mediation in China. Looking forward to hearing more from you, sharing more from you. I'm a big fan of learning and sharing more because I know that I have plenty more to learn. I have learned much from Vikram already today and from Abe and Giovanni. So looking forward to hearing from you more, sharing a little bit more, and together I'm sure we can make mediation